What is going on, you guys, and welcome back to another video. As you guys can see, I got the box to the iPhone 7 in this beautiful 32GB variant in silver, but we're actually going to be taking a look at this phone in 2024, seeing what kind of things are still working after all these years. It's literally been almost 8 years since this phone came out, so time seriously does fly. Like, it's crazy to think that 8 years ago, this was the flagship Apple iPhone, but over the years, things do change. We're going to see what kind of things are still working. More on that later in this video. Before I get into it, this was the first ever device to come in that jet black color, the first device to never come with a headphone jack either, so that's pretty cool to see. And there's just so many cool features about this device that we'll be covering in today's video, so let's get right into it. And one thing I did want to mention, by the way, is that this phone is running iOS 10, so that basically means it's running its launch software. So if you were to go into the Apple Store and buy the iPhone 7 in 2016, this is the same software that you would get. Of course, not the exact same, as there's like different versions of iOS 10, but you guys get the idea. This is just gonna kind of give you guys a realistic scenario of what it was like using this phone in 2016. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so one of the first things I love to test out on devices like these is just connectivity in general. Like, can you pop a SIM card into it and make phone calls, access LTE, and all that awesome stuff? So here in the US, because the 3G network has shut down, we are very limited on what we can do with these devices. But I did test out Ultra Mobile a couple months ago, and it was working perfectly fine on this device. It did have a couple hiccups here and there. Sometimes the phone would say no service. So I would say it probably won't work the way that you expect it to, just because here in the US, 3G does not exist anymore. It was shut down, I think like 2 years ago or something, or maybe a year ago. But yeah, it's gone now. So you can only use LTE or 5G, or I guess 4G in a way. You can fall back to different networks, but 2G and 3G are pretty much gone at this point. But for the sake of this video, we're going to be using Wi-Fi only, just because I don't have that cellular plan anymore to test out. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so one of the first things we'll test out is, of course, the App Store. And right off the bat, it's actually working perfectly fine. So for those who may have seen my last video, the App Store has stopped working on some older iOS versions, like iOS 6, but on iOS 10, it's still working perfectly fine. You can sign in. And the trick here really is to just download everything through your purchase history. So I would recommend downloading the app on a modern iPhone, like an iPhone 15, and then use that same Apple ID to actually sign into here. And then you can kind of just install whatever apps you want. Of course, there's going to be software limitations because some of these apps simply did not exist back in 2016. And so the app will simply just download the oldest version that was available, or I should say like the most recent version that was available. So I hope that makes sense. The other thing that also works, which is pretty cool, is iMessage. So I was actually just kind of playing around with iMessage over here, just kind of texting myself. But one of the things I love is that you can actually still send music and all that cool stuff. But here is the digital message. I don't know if you guys remember this, but you could send these digital messages to your friends very quick and easy. I think you can still send them, but they're kind of hidden in the iMessage app. But for some reason, it did end up sending two, which was kind of weird to see. And then, of course, the camera app, very quick and easy, very easy to use. Yeah, I mean, it really does not get any simpler than that. And then, of course, we also had voice messages as well. And for some reason, it ends up sending two as well. So that's definitely got to be a glitch. But love to see the iMessage is still working. I think that really comes to show that Apple support really does go beyond like the typical product cycle, because I'm pretty sure that iOS 15 was the last software update for this device. So it's still pretty recent. Like, you can still use this phone today, but it's just not going to have the latest features because it's not running the latest iOS. So hopefully that makes sense. And then, of course, there's going to be those apps here and there that simply will not work. Like Snapchat is one of the apps, which I'm pretty sure you won't be able to log into. But again, guys, I don't really recommend logging into software that's like outdated, especially on your own personal accounts, because you probably don't want to do that, because there's security updates that are usually sent out over time. It's kind of like the same way why Apple Pay won't work, because you need to log into your bank account in order to verify your card. So that's a whole additional step, and I do not recommend logging into your bank on an old device like this, because everything is outdated. Unless you're on the latest iOS version and the app is supported on there, then sure. But if it's not, then just be super careful with where you guys log into. Okay, so the next segment of this video is actually going to be just a camera test, very short, quick, and easy. I'm going to put up a couple photos on the screen. You guys can guess which one was taken by which phone. The first one probably is pretty obvious, but yeah, the one on the right here is the iPhone 14, which is pretty cool to see. But honestly, like, not a bad photo at all. I think the iPhone 14 just has a much more wider lens, so it can kind of capture more of the image. So that kind of explains why the iPhone 7 was slightly cut off right over there. The other photo, of course, that we have here is some outdoor photos, so you guys can take a look at these, guess which one is which. With the first one here, I think it's pretty obvious as well, but I have to say the iPhone 7 did a really good job for everything that it has to offer. With the second one here though, take a look at this. Which one do you guys think was taken by which phone? So the iPhone 7 actually did a really good job, surprisingly, and I was really surprised. I was literally out in like 101-degree weather. It is literally 100 degrees right now. This is what it's like living in Arizona, guys. For my Canadian audience, that is like 38 degrees Celsius, so very, very hot for sure. But yeah, this photo here honestly looks amazing on the iPhone 7. I love the way that it turned out. And then I just had a couple other photos here as well. You guys can take a look. And I even got a little video here as well for you guys to see, just to see how like the stabilization worked on both of these devices. So, you know, putting them side by side, iPhone 7 and iPhone 14, many years apart. But I think both of these phones did a fairly good job, and I could honestly see myself using a phone like this in 2024. Like, I'm not even kidding when I say that. If it could run all the apps that I use with security updates, maybe a slightly better battery, I honestly just really miss the home button, guys. Like, I think that was definitely a big selling point for me. I know with like the notch and everything, or whatever you call it, like dynamic island, it's easier to swipe up, but for the nostalgia, we got to bring back the home button to some of the flagship devices. Okay, so the next part I want to show you guys, of course, is just music in general. The iPhone 7 is a great media device if you guys want to pick one up just for media consumption. But heads up, if you're using one on iOS 10 right now, Spotify is not going to work. I did try logging into it. As you guys can see here, I actually tried this last night, so I took a screenshot, but it simply says that it won't work. And I tried both ways. I tried logging in using my username and password and my Facebook login. Neither of them worked, so I don't think Spotify is going to be working on this device, which is a bummer. But Apple Music does seem to work. As you guys can see, we have the album artwork on here as well. I honestly miss this feature a lot. I mean, I know it's still available on the latest iPhone, but the way that it worked back in the day, like nothing happened when you actually clicked on the album artwork itself. So very cool feature for sure. But it was kind of a bummer to see the album artwork disappear in iOS 11, but Apple did end up bringing it back. So that's all that matters, guys. But yeah, I was just going to say, you know, like this is a great device if you just want to take it to the gym, keep it inside of your car as a media device to listen to music. But just keep in mind, this thing does not have an aux or 3.5mm headphone jack. So that might be a deal breaker for some people. So definitely something to keep in mind. But overall, a very great device, even in 2024. Like, I'm actually so surprised by how many features are still working. And of course, there were a few other features that I want to highlight here as well before we end off the video. The control center. This was one of the weirdest control centers that Apple has ever made. It had like these two panels, and it was just like kind of hard to use. I think if you had Apple Kit as well, where you had like interior lighting, if you wanted to turn that on, then it would actually create a third row for you. So Apple actually did end up ditching this like type of control center with iOS 11. So this was only available for one iOS version ever, and that was iOS 10. So I thought that was kind of cool. It does make it pretty rare, especially on a device like this, but I don't know, like, what do you guys think about this? Like, I think it was a little weird. It was definitely hard to use, but looking back at it now, it just looks very out of place. I don't know what you guys think, but be sure to comment that down below. So that was the control center. Another thing was also just like being able to access your app switcher by holding on to the side. It's a little hard to do because this thing does have that glass screen protector, but it is possible, and it's a lot more easier, especially for like one-handed use. But yeah, that thing is actually really hard to do. Like, you have to like really press hard in order to make that happen. So that's pretty interesting to see. I also just love the stock iOS 10 wallpapers, but personally my favorite wallpaper has to be the iOS 9 one. But since this is running iOS 10, we can't rock that wallpaper, so we're going to be using this one here. It's like this little blue wallpaper, which I think looks pretty cool. But yeah, overall, like, I'm actually really impressed by how many things are still working on this device after all these years, and considering that it's still running iOS 10 as well, is honestly like super impressive. So the question probably that you guys are wondering is the iPhone 7 still worth it in 2024? I would say if you're an Apple collector, go for it. If you find one on iOS 10, I feel like they're getting more and more rare by the day. And if I had to estimate like a ballpark of like of the price of this phone, I'd say don't spend more than like $50, or I'd say don't spend more than like $75. Anywhere between 50 to 75 I think should be fair for an iPhone 7 running iOS 10. Of course, you know, some sellers might try to upsell it just based on like the value of the phone because it's running iOS 10. So something to keep in mind. You guys can always comment down below if you guys find something, you know, help the community out. I'm sure there's a lot more iOS 10 iPhones out there, so just gotta look. But yeah, overall, like if this phone is going to be used for personal use, I would say update it. Make sure you guys get the security updates. My dad is still using an iPhone 7 on iOS 15, I believe, but his use is like pretty limited, very, very basic, like just social media and like just YouTube and stuff. So yeah, he's definitely due for an upgrade, but I'd say if you're using it for personal use, just make sure you guys are updated, get all that security stuff out of the way. But yeah, just make sure you guys are updated on the iOS just to make sure everything is safe. But yeah, overall, I'd say great device. If you're a collector, definitely pick one up. And if you guys want to see more videos on the iPhone 7, be sure to comment that down below. I feel like I've had this phone for so long, but just never really got around to filming with it. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to let me know what kind of content you guys want to see next. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.